Today on Locked On Red Wings, the salary cap is set to surge over the next 3 seasons. This can positively impact the Detroit Red Wings if they get a start on it now.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's a host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a sports writer for C&G newspaper. Congratulations to Scotty. He went full-time in the sports writing business. Congratulations to him. And I am a color commentator for Oakland University ACHA D1 men's hockey. Scotty, we wanted to talk about it over the weekend. Well, obviously, we didn't have time with 2 games, 2 back-to-back wins. We were kind of riding an emotional high last night, so we figured we'd store it for the off day. The salary cap is rising next year and over the next 3 years, 7.5 this offseason, and then about 9 the next 2 years. I said in the cold open, a salary cap surge. So we will talk about that and the implications it could have on the Detroit Red Wings, or implications it already has on the Detroit Red Wings, and what it could mean for them as they continue to try to build towards success going forward. But first, got to talk to you guys today about FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com today to get started. All right, Scotty. We heard the news, Friday, maybe Thursday, prior to the games that were being played by the Red Wings. And with the news of the Detroit Red Wings, or the NHL salary cap rather, rising $7.5 million and rising to, was it $95.5 million next season from $88 million that it is this year? What was your reaction when you saw the official news of the jump?
My initial reaction was just I'm very pro that. I think that in general, incentivizing teams and having salaries go up is good. That means that the sport is thriving, means the sport is growing. Obviously, there's some econ stuff to talk about that isn't really our jurisdiction. But I think that in general, when you see when you see that type of change happen in such a dramatic way, that it is almost always a good thing. And if they are willing to pay players more, I am in favor of that nearly every single time it's offered. So I like it. I think that it also, and what we'll spend a bulk of today's show talking about is, it adds a wrinkle of strategy, not only in 3 years when it's at the next, spot it's going to chill out for a while, but also it adds a ton of strategy as you are getting there. I think that these next few years can really be vital towards, how teams are constructing their rosters. Because as you mentioned, earlier in the cold open, whenever it was, that, this is an opportunity for a lot of teams to kind of jump out ahead of the curve. The only thing is that it's not going to be a well-kept secret. Everyone is going to be very well aware of that, and agents are going to be aware of that, and players are going to be aware of that. So I'm really interested in how all parties involved, I guess, are really going to navigate the next 3 seasons with it going up so dramatically.
Yeah, and that's the big thing too, right? This is not something that just benefits the Red Wings. It's something that benefits every single team in the NHL. And my first reaction when I saw this was this is a really good time to be a team exiting a rebuild like the Detroit Red Wings. Because a lot of teams, they spend their rebuild, the early parts, just kind of sucking, tanking for draft picks, selling off bloated contracts, everything's past that. Then it's drafting those guys, starting developing those guys. And now we're in the later stages of the rebuild where it's about having those guys begin to make an impact at the NHL level as you make a push for the playoffs. As you can see, as we know, the Red Wings are sitting at wild card 1 as of recording this. And the first time they've been in a playoff position since November 6th, by the way. I did check. I was curious where they were at. And they've already began to lock up their long-term guys. Normally the salary cap only rises a little bit every single year. But we're set to see huge jumps over the next couple of years. At $88 million this year, it's going to be $95.5 million next year, $104 million the year after that. That's almost a $9 million jump, and then $113 million the year after that, $113.5 million after that. Those are massive jumps. 7.5, 8.5, and was it another 8.5 after that? The incredibly high jumps. And for a team like the Detroit Red Wings, Scotty, looking at the guys that we've already locked up, that is a huge boon because guys like Dylan Larkin, who you signed at 8 times 8.5, or 8.7 rather, Lucas Raymond, who you signed at 8 times 8.075, and Moritz Seider, who you signed at 7 times $8.55 million. Every single one of those contracts, while already being, Lucas Raymond was arguably a steal when he signed that contract, and even Moritz Seider, I know they knocked a year off to get that number down. They were already bordering on like kind of steal territory with the production that they had given us, and even more so and 1 year into those contracts.
Why do you think they had to knock a year down to get the number down?
Because it was going to.
Everyone is aware that the cap is going up.
Right.
Like that. It's not a. That's not a. Again, we're not letting everybody in on a big secret. Like people that are in and connected and around the game and get paid a ton of money to deal with NHL contracts have known that this is coming and are already starting to plan accordingly, while teams are also trying to get out ahead of it. So it's interesting because there is an advantage to be had, but it also is interesting because all parties involved are well aware of it, and I'm not sure.
Right.
I mean, again, the Seider thing is a great example. They had to knock a year off in order to get the price to where everybody was pleased, because at 8 years, it clearly was too rich for the Wings.
Yeah, but that's the thing, too, is now with those salary cap, in 3 years, when we're in the middle of these contracts, these guys are going to be borderline underpaid for where the salary cap is at, right? Like the percentage of the cap that these three players already occupy is going to shrink tremendously. And in 3 years' time, we're going to be looking to be like, these guys could probably make another, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, but like another $3 million, and it to be equal value to what it is today in today's salary cap, and we're going to still have 3 or 4 more years at the current hit. Right. So my initial reaction was, oh my God, this just made the extensions that these players just signed, even better than they did the day they were signed. They're already fair when they were signed. Now they look like borderline steals. And Scotty, on top of that, now this is an aspect where I don't want to get too excited because this is a part where every single team has this advantage too, right? But that does mean the Red Wings are going to have an extra $7.5 million to spend next year, where their available cap space jumped from like $18 million next season to $25 million in the offseason. So that's a big thing, right? We talked about it in the offseason. With Seider and Raymond, the Red Wings are against the cap going into the year. And that was a big sticking point for a lot of people. But you and I spent the offseason, one of the things we talked about was reassuring people that the cap management has actually been very good for the Detroit Red Wings. Because every single year they have contracts coming off the book. The way they staggered it, nobody having incredibly long deals. And I mean, I know the Cop deal at 5 years and the Comfort deal at 5 years and Sherrod at 4 feels long, but it could have been worse. Teams like the Seattle Kraken, who the Red Wings are playing today, handed Chandler Stevenson 7 years, and they're already regretting that. That's staggering these contracts so you have big money coming off the books every single off year. Combine that with the salary cap going up. The Red Wings have so much more room to improve this team while already having their core locked up. The salary cap surge is obviously going to help every team, but the Red Wings stand to benefit so much by having the salary cap bump up, which is why part of the reason I'm so excited.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you mentioned those contracts. A lot of those names you just mentioned come off the books during that span, right? So it's right. Kind of a double win for the Wings. Not only are they going to be getting, in the same year that Sherrod's contract comes off the books, you're getting subtracted wherever that $5 million, whatever that contract is, AAV wise, you're getting that off the books that offseason, plus you're getting the additional whatever it is going to be that specific offseason, $7 million, $9 million, whatever, getting added to it. So you're really pulling in both directions for a huge benefit in the Wings' favor.
Yeah, and it's incredibly exciting to see the surge, this salary cap surge happen. It's been hinted at for a while yet, but there's one more thing that I think is really important if you're a Detroit Red Wings fan, and that is I think that the clock is beginning to tick on the remaining RFAs that you think are going to be a major part of this team to getting them signed sooner rather than later. It's the double-edged sword aspect of this salary cap surge. And we'll talk about the why in segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Stay tuned. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets from the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, there's a I wouldn't call it a con or a downside to the salary cap going up, because ultimately it's all good things. For every single team in the league, it's good for the NHL. But what I do think it means is that the Red Wings should put an emphasis on signing guys like Simon Edvinsson and Marco Kasper sooner rather than later as the salary cap goes up. And I know the Red Wings have an internal cap structure, right, with Dylan Larkin. But if Simon Edvinsson, you believe he's going to be a Moritz Seider caliber defenseman, that means that he is going to be commanding not 8.75 in 3 years, but the percentage of the salary cap equal to that 8.75 in that year, which could put him at 9, 10, 11 million, whatever that percentage is. I'm not doing the math live on the air here for you people, but you understand the sentiment. So as the salary cap continues to jump, it puts the emphasis on locking up a player that you believe is a piece of your core sooner rather than later, so you can do the same thing that you're doing with Raymond and Seider 4 years down the road, look at it and say, this is a steal, rather than having it be a higher number.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also you don't want to be too early on it either, right? Like you don't want to completely pay based off of projection either, because that's a risky game and you could end up really overpaying really quickly. But I think, I mean, if we're breaking down like where we stand on those two players specifically, I would be a lot more comfortable paying Edvinsson than I would Kasper at the present moment. I honestly think that going forward, that will probably be a conversation this summer about whether it's worth extending Edvinsson or not. I don't know. Maybe I'll be completely wrong, but I don't think unless Kasper, and he's been producing a lot more lately. He's great. I love Marco Kasper, but I think that they probably wait maybe another year until that. And even if they do wait another year, then you're still talking about, 2 more salary bumps happening, in the following years. It's not like they have to do it tomorrow in order to reap the benefits here. They can play the waiting game. I think there's enough unknowns with what Kasper is going to be at the NHL still to really want to jump the gun and get that done right now. Whereas Edvinsson, I think you already are pretty confident that he's going to at worst be a top 4 in your blue line for years to come.
Yeah, and I'm doing the math really quick because I just want to give that example for the people. So currently as it stands, if you were to sign Moritz Seider at the same percentage of the salary cap, sign Simon Edvinsson at the same percentage of the salary cap that Moritz Seider currently is, 2 years from now when his ELC is up, you'll be paying him $10 million. Whereas if you sign him this offseason and you lock him up at a percentage similar, and like again, if he hasn't reached the pinnacle, he's not as good yet as Seider was. So again, like you said, there is an inherent risk to paying him earlier if you don't know how good he is. And like Edvinsson, I don't think is going to be as good as Seider in the aspect of I don't think he has the same offensive upside. Not that he doesn't have an offensive upside. He's still on pace for 30-plus points. As a defenseman, that's very impressive. But Seider has the 40-plus, 50-plus ceiling in terms of offense, and Edvinsson is just his length is going to be really useful in the defensive zone. But my point here being is, as the salary cap rises, these guys who are going to be part of your core are going to demand more money because they're looking not at what the number is specifically when Seider signed it, but the percentage of the salary cap that it was. And so locking him up sooner as the cap rises, I think then becomes more paramount. And I do agree with you too, Scotty. Right now, Simon Edvinsson is the guy you're focusing on because he's the guy we've seen the most. We've seen him now in parts of 3 seasons. He's functionally a rookie, but he's not technically a rookie anymore. But Marco Kasper, I agree. Like, you can't do it yet. I think I agree. You need another season out of him. You need to see a full season in the NHL because he's a little bit of a slow starter. We saw it with Grand Rapids last year too, and you can see him coming on now. But I would still try and do it before their ELCs are up, like you did with Raymond and Seider. Because I mean, you and I were talking. We wanted to lock him up last year, and so did Prashant Thayer, Max Boltman, all those guys. So it's just a matter of negotiations, and for Moritz Seider, at least Claude Lemieux ran a hard bargain. But I think it's just wise. I think we have already seen enough of Simon Edvinsson to know that he's going to be really good in the NHL. And the longer you put off signing him and extending him, the more money and percentage of the cap he's going to command. And so that's the downside of the salary cap surging, is that these players are going to begin. I mean, you're going to get players reaching $16, $17, $18 million. I mean, I'm talking generational talents very, very shortly here in the NHL, and that's going to create more comparables. It's just going to push those salaries higher, so it kind of just puts an emphasis and starts the clock on extending and signing your core pieces long-term now, if you're convinced they're core pieces. And I think I'm already convinced Simon Edvinsson is a core piece of this team moving forward. I mean, in the future, he's going to be your left side D along Moritz Seider. He already was until necessity dictated they split him up because we lacked the depth.
Yeah. I think it's it's kind of a tightrope act here in terms of Edvinsson because the Wings want to make sure they know what they have in him, right? And so there's they're not going to extend him again. They're not extending him tomorrow, but I think that there is also, on the flip side, as you mentioned, pretty big incentive for Edvinsson to kind of like wait a little bit. And the better that he plays and the better he gets, the higher that price tag is going to be because, again, of everyone being aware of the salary cap rising. So not that he's going to like hold out forever until he's a UFA. Like, I'd imagine they want to get something done before then, both parties. But I do think that it's really tough. It's a really tough to find that kind of perfect timing because, like the Wings could just be like, hey, like you haven't even played a full season of NHL hockey yet. We're going to give you, $5 million a year. And like, Edvinsson's going to be like, wow, well, that's a lot for me at my current age. But like, I think everyone in Edvinsson's camp is probably like, all right, well, he's going to be worth more than that. So like, let's not do that right now and maybe wait. But at the same time, the Wings don't want to overpay for someone that has played less than 80 games at the NHL level. So it's tough. It really is kind of a tightrope act here. And I don't think, hey, like if he ends up being as good or better than Seider, we're going to have a generational blue line. But like, I don't think he's going to get like anywhere near percentage wise what Seider got as far as that. I mean, that it's kind of similar to like the Raymond conversations last year. Everybody was like, well, like the Wings don't want to pay anyone more than Larkin. It's like, okay, well then like, here we go. Right. So it'll be interesting. I cannot wait to see what both sides want to do. I think it's going to be one of the more talked about things of this upcoming summer. But I also really wouldn't be surprised if both parties decide it's kind of just easier to wait a little bit longer still.
Well, and that's another thing you mentioned there, and now I want to ask your opinion. Do you feel now that the salary cap has jumped $25 million over the next 3 years, is it possible to maintain Dylan Larkin as your ceiling in your internal cap and still like actually be fishing for the big fish in free agency and locking up your term? Like, I feel like because of this jump in the next few years, you're going to end up paying somebody a little higher than that number. Unless you think that, and it's also possible, if that were the case, it would have to be a free agent. I I mean, Simon Edvinsson maybe just depends on how he develops. He's a top pair talent in my opinion. But it's just that 8.7 makes sense right now at 88 million. But when it's 113 million, if you're trying to lure a big time free agent here, how are you going to justify saying, yeah, but I'm not going to pay you more than this number? I think that it's going to become really hard to maintain that. You may have to set a new marker, a new player as that internal cap. But I mean, either way, those 3 contracts already being signed gives you that flexibility in the future. Like having these 3 guys in 3 years on what will be at that point team-friendly deals gives you the ability to be flexible and make an impact trade, make an impact acquisition, or sign another one of these first-round picks, be it Edvinsson, Casper, Danielson, Kosa, Axel Sandin Pellikka, to a big-time deal as well. So it's a question I have for you, but also it's probably a good thing to have.
Yeah, I really don't see any scenario in which the Red Wings, like, for the rest of time are just like, we're not going to pay anyone more than Larkin. I think this specific situation with Larkin and Raymond was just like, Larkin's been here forever and paid his dues, and that was within 12 months, right, of each other, and that was a homegrown player. Like, there's so many reasons why that made so much more sense with the Raymond conversation. I don't think that Larkin or the Red Wings, either party, is like, Larkin has to be the highest paid player on the team. Like, I really don't think that that's that deep of a thing or something that anybody in that front office or in that locker room really cares about. I think though that specific instance was just homegrown, but you're talking very young player versus somebody who's been in the organization almost 10 years already. And it was close enough within signing each other that it kind of made sense to make that benchmark. I really don't expect that to be a factor whatsoever going forward.
All right. We're going to head to another break. When we return, we will preview the game against the Seattle Kraken, try to make it another 7-game winning streak. Stay tuned to Locked on Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked on Red Wings podcast. Scotty, the Red Wings are finishing up their Western Canada road trip with a stop in Seattle, which is notably not in Canada, but every year they always peg that on to the very end of the Western Canada road trip just because of the proximity to Canada. And Seattle, Scotty, I have 2 thoughts in my head, which is more than usual. Typically,
I was
going to say,
that's a lot for you.
Yeah. The Seattle Kraken are not a good hockey team. They're 5-5, I think, in their last 10 or some combination of 5 wins and 5 losses.
They're exactly 5-5 in their last.
Exactly 5-5. Okay, I wasn't sure if any of those were OT losses or not.
Nope,
they're 7th in the
5-5
Pacific Division. 7th in the Pacific Division. 5 games under a 500 point percentage as well. They are not a good hockey team. But the Detroit Red Wings just played 2 games less than 24 hours apart, had a mandatory off day / travel day, and now have to go into Seattle without having worked on any of the things that may have been plaguing them. Similar to what happened before the Red Wings got stunned by San Jose at home at the end of their last win streak. So my one thought is Seattle should be a team. This is a team you should beat, get a 7-game winning streak, and head into, well, you have one more game, but pseudo head into your All-Star break with a strong finish. But also, this feels like Vancouver was a scheduled loss. This feels like a trap game.
Yeah. Look, Seattle isn't a good hockey team this year, but there's still a lot of players on this team from a Kraken team that was good. That was worded horribly, but I think you get my sentiment. Like, they are not that far removed from having a pretty solid Kraken team, and a lot of those players are still here. This is still a young, up-and-coming team. You mentioned some moves they've made that haven't been that great, and I think that that's probably part of the reason why they find themselves here. But I agree with you. I think that asking any hockey team to win 7 games in a row is already hard enough. Nonetheless, capping off the end of a Western Canada road trip, going undefeated on the entire road trip is something that going into the roadie, I would not have demanded or asked. So I'm not saying like just roll over and die, right? Like I'm not just saying, oh, just lose, who cares? But if they do drop this one, I really don't think it's the end of the world. And I am very, very pleased that if I look at my calendar here, they have the next 4 days off. So they get a nice long recovery time from the end of this game against the Kraken until they suit up again.
Yeah, so it's not the end of the world, obviously, and they've had an incredible stretch. Not like I'll be mad about it, but just it's such a tight playoff race right now, and with 2 weeks off encroaching, at risk of sounding selfish, I want them to win this hockey game. And
well, no,
shocking, Red Wings fan wants his team to win.
They're the better team. I don't think that's like getting too greedy. I really don't think it is. I'm simply saying, given the context of this
Correct.
game and what they've been doing, where they are geographically, and how the last 3 games have looked, it really wouldn't shock me if they dropped it. And I don't think the season's over if they do. But it's still a roster that you are better than, and that assuming the goaltending continues to play how it has the last, week plus, you probably are going to be in a position where it's a close game that maybe you can even go out and take again.
Right. I 100% agree. And since Christmas, right, I'm using Christmas as a marker because that's when Todd McClellan came in. Seattle ranks 27th in the league in shot attempt share at 5-on-5 with 46%. So their advanced analytics isn't good. Their expected goals for percentage in that span is even worse at 29th at 43% rather. Red Wings not doing too much better in that category at 26th in that span, but that is still an improvement over what it was with Derek Lalonde. They don't have really any point production. Jared McCann is their leading scorer at 41 points in 51 games, followed by Chandler Stevenson. Did I say Chandler Stevenson or did I say Mitchell Stevens earlier when I was talking about the guy who signed a 7-year contract?
I think you said Chandler.
Okay, I just want to make sure because I saw Mitchell Stevens on the roster too, and then I was like, did I say the right name?
I can only tell you what I heard. Not what you said.
If that's what you heard, then you heard the
right,
correct
which
thing.
may be two very different things. But
hopefully everyone else heard the correct thing too. But Chandler Stevenson, who signed the 7-year deal and has been underperforming, is their second leading scorer at 38 and 53, but he's only got 9 goals on the season. So, they're not getting a lot of goal scoring. What's propping them up right now, Scotty, is phenomenal goaltending out of Joey Dackard. Joey Dackard has a .917 save percentage on this season. .917. They waived Philip Grubauer, who the Detroit Red Wings lit up back at LCA, earlier this month? And I guess it would be last month at this point. Now they have called up Streza, whatever the guy, this other guy they called up from the AHL is. He's their backup now because Grubauer is down in the AHL. So I'm guessing you're going to see Dackard. That's your biggest threat. Is Dackard going to be Dackard for the Seattle Kraken? Because if that's the case, then they Kraken have a shot. That plus, how are the Red Wings respond after a sluggish, grinded out win without really any real rest or work at what was ailing them.
For sure. Yeah, this is one where you just say, you know what, you get through this one, you got 4 days off after this, boys. Let's just get through this game. Let's get another win. Let's beat a team that we're better than and head home.
Yeah, because their special teams isn't really anything to write home about either.
No, the only thing they have going for them in kind of that regard is just that they don't commit penalties. They have some of the fewest PIMs in the league. So, this probably isn't going to be a game where Detroit is going to be on the power play too much, which is always good for an opposing team to not have the Red Wings power play be on the ice, as it's, been one of the best in the NHL this year. So, you're going to have to be better than them 5-on-5 most likely, and you should be.
Tell me, Scotty, how are the Seattle Kraken in the face-off circle?
Oh, they're not very good, Bri. They're really not. I'll tell you something. If what are they? 27th, 26th? They're somewhere
24th.
around there. Yeah. So
24th.
Yeah, you're talking about a bottom 10 team in the face-off circle, but the Wings aren't too terribly
middle of the pack.
Yeah, too significantly better than that. So, keep throwing Larkin out there in the defensive zone for face-offs, and let's go win a hockey game.
You know what's funny is we didn't bring it up because it didn't fit the narrative, but Larkin got hammered in the face-off circle on
which is
one
the
of the two games this
opposite
last
of
weekend.
what he did last week when we talked about how he was put together an all-time face-off performance in that one.
It was either Calgary or Vancouver, and I can't remember off the top of my head because those kind of blend together. He went like 20% in the face-off circle like the following game after going 60 and winning 24. But that's hockey. Anyway, hockey. Scotty, any final thoughts?
I don't think so, man. We ball.
We do ball. Obviously, let us know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below in terms of the salary cap surge. What would you guys do with the youth in Simon Edvinsson? Would you sign them as soon as you can, or were you going to wait to see how they pan out a little bit more before handing them that paycheck? We'll be back with a recap tomorrow. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.